All right, so the format now is very different from earlier. Earlier was a panel where I was basically animating and making sure that people get the tough questions. This is more of a fireside chat. So this is where everyone can challenge everyone else, and everyone is allowed to bring their own case study or examples. And the theme of the conference today is humanizing the digital experience. That sounds all very nice and fancy, but what does that really mean? And so thank you, Paul, for inviting Enrique and Eric, because that's a really nice spectrum from very technical to non-technical, and from human-centric to not, and design being very important, so that's really good. I have Divi also with us, which is from TDK-InvenSense, who's going to talk about what we mean by humanizing the digital experience, and we are still figuring it out in a way. And so it's a fireside chat because we don't aim to say that we exactly know what we mean by this, and we're still figuring it out. But we thought that discussion could be very interesting. And so I hope you're going to enjoy today's fireside chat. I'll start with a 60-second introduction of everyone. We have the slides so that if people arrive late, they can read about it. But if you can say something about you and why you think that design or humanizing the experience is so important. Do you want to start, Enrique?
Hello, thank you for being here. It's great to share this space, and I hope you guys ask some great questions today. My name is Enrique. I'm one of the co-founders of Designer Fund, and ultimately, I'm motivated by helping people and our planet, and technology, and a lot of the things that we've talked about today are in service of that, in my opinion. And I'm really excited about investing in areas that traditionally have not received a lot of design love. So spaces like financial services, health, enterprise tools, where the current bar for the user experience is like pen and paper and tons of bureaucracy and frustrating experiences. So I really want to help rid the world of bad design, and I think there's no shortage of bad design everywhere that we look. And I hope that in the future, everyone can use good, responsible design. We'll talk more about that soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, Enrique. My name is Paul Holland. I'm a general partner at Foundation Capital. We're a 22-year-old venture fund up in Palo Alto. We were formed out of the ashes of a firm called Merrill Pickard Anderson & Iyer that formed about 30 companies that went public. Back in 1995, that firm broke into two pieces. It broke into Benchmark Capital and Foundation Capital. I spent my operating career working for the Benchmark guys. First company where Eric and I worked together was a company called Pure Software with this unknown but very brilliant software developer, Reed Hastings. We took that company public in 1995. I went on to join another benchmark company, Kana Communications, with a guy named Mark Ganey, who's probably better known now for Strava, which is a fun application for those of you who are athletes. With Kana, we were very fortunate. Between Pure and Kana, ended up with about $13 billion in market cap during my operating career. Reed, of course, went on to start a very interesting digitizing the human experience company with Netflix that had a very big night last night at the Emmys. And we're fortunate because Netflix is one of our 28 IPOs at Foundation Capital, but we also do a lot of work in deep technology and areas that are very relevant for TDK and InvenSense. So.
Thanks. So I'm Divi Gupta. I run the Fingerprint business group at TDK. Prior to that, though, I was leading in the US the technology strategy from an organic and an inorganic point of view. And so I was involved with numerous investments that we considered in M&A deals. And for me, the goal was to get new technology into TDK. InvenSense is, of course, a sensor company. There's software that ties the sensors together. But what I'm most interested in is how to improve a user's experience, how to do more things for people using sensors. And right now, I think there's a mismatch. Sensors provide data. Often it's the wrong data or in the wrong context. And so, like to bridge the gap as best we can. and that keeps with the theme of the conference here, humanizing the digital experience, and that's what the focus is for me.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is LaBadie. I am the VP of Sales at Maya Systems. We are the leader in AI recruiting. Before Maya, I've spent the last 25 years in VC-backed technology companies, including the one that Paul just mentioned, Pure Software. Also been involved in both startups and very large companies, including IBM. And for today, I think there's a really interesting opportunity to talk about sort of the impact that technology can have on people. And from our lens, it's really about the impact of helping people find jobs and for recruiters to help find the best qualified candidates and be able to improve that experience for both sides of the equation. Because traditionally, candidates have been kind of left in the dark about their application for a particular role. They don't know kind of where they are, if they're still being considered for the job. And at the same time, you've got the recruiters who struggle to find great candidates and oftentimes have to settle. And so I think there's a really interesting bridge between kind of the way people used to do things with manual process, and now with technology and AI, it's really opened up a world of efficiencies to make people's lives better and really help reduce that frictional unemployment.
Thank you. So my name is Nicolas Sauvage. I'm in charge of ecosystem in TDK-InvenSense, which basically means working with partners to make sure that we build solutions that really delivers value to our customers, and in a way that we think about job to be done, something that's really valuable and meaningful for the end user. So who wants to take the first shot at defining humanizing the digital experience? This is a really tough one to start. It's funny, everyone is looking at you.
The experts.
Let's see. As I was on my way down to this event, I was reflecting on some recent research, and in Japan, a researcher built this AI robot, Today. Did you guys hear about this? No, it was basically a robot that applied to the University of Tokyo, the most prestigious Tokyo in Japan, and it outperformed like 80% of applicants, including writing an essay, taking a math test, etc. But at the end of the day, the things that it wasn't able to do was to really make any sense, make any meaning, or really craft a compelling narrative. It didn't really express any, a lot of creative ability. So when I think about humanizing an experience, I hope that we focus on things that make us uniquely human. So the ability to make meaning and narratives, which are really important, and a lot of that I think was probably covered in this past panel on AR and VR. Number 2 is around emotion and creating empathetic experiences that hopefully spur action and compassion. And another thing that I think is really important is around relationships. Anything that can bring people together in person or digitally to connect and to develop a meaningful relationship is something that's, I think, uniquely human. So meaning, emotions, relationships, I think those are the types of things that technology should support and enable, and not further distract us. There's, I think in the US, Cigna recently did some research, and about over 50% of Americans are lonely, and that contributes to time depression and other sorts of things. So we have more technology than we've ever had before, yet more people are lonely, particularly Gen Z, and more people are depressed. So I think we need to shift how some of our technologies and applications are applied if we're really going to bring people together in a meaningful way. So I'll pause there.
It's like giving you the baton,
Sure. Same question, I assume?
It's as you see fit, but yes, it will look like you give up on trying if you don't have an answer there.
Sure, I'll take a stab at it, sure. And so, for me, there's as I said in the opening statement, a mismatch, I think, between sensors and the human. For instance, with our sight, our vision, we see things very differently than a camera would. And the kind of machine learning algorithms that are done, to an AI that is done to process video image works in a very different way than our brain. Our brain is very much an analog machine, and computers are, of course, digital by nature, which isn't human by nature. And so there's a lot of research into analog computing and alternative computing methodologies that can be used for some subset of these problems. But generally, for me, coming back, humanizing, means closing the gap between the way our brains work and that kind of emotional reactions people have to different things, incorporating that information into sensor fusion algorithms, as an example, could make your personal assistant know if you're frustrated with it, or understand your mood and better tie in and anticipate your needs. And then you'll feel like your personal assistant is giving you consideration, which would be very much a human emotion. And so right now, people don't think these devices work very well, at least from the humanizing point of view. And so I need to try to understand how emerging technologies will enable better experiences. And for TDK's point of view, we want to be behind making those sensors better, making sensor fusion work better, for the individual.
I think you gave a perfect transition for Eric.
Yeah, well, certainly. So, coming from an AI company, there's a huge distinction between sort of how AI was employed, say, a decade ago versus what's happening today in the industry. If you look at when people talk about AI, or they'll talk about chatbots, for example. People have experiences of trying to buy an airline ticket or talking to a support person that's a chatbot and getting frustrated. And the component that was always missing when you were having a bad experience with a chatbot was that it didn't have the knowledge, and it couldn't build a rapport, and it would break, and people would get frustrated. And with the innovations recently in AI, people have been able to leverage some of the capabilities to develop these relationships by understanding what's being said, reflecting that back to people. At Maya, we call it knowledge representation, which is essentially being able to encapsulate what was heard and saying, I understood your intent, and I'm reflecting back what I heard. And that's part, I think, of a human wants to talk to somebody that can relate to them. Certainly I do, and I think that most people feel the same way. And so, for us, everything that we do is around high quality conversation to make those connections. And the exciting thing is that when you make a connection with someone, whether it's a human or a bot, it opens up a world of opportunities. And for us in the world of recruiting, that means that we can unlock information about someone, understand what's important to them, and use those insights to help them find a great job. But without having that connection, it limits you. So there's really incredible upside to being able to forge those relationships, and doing it all through automation, which means it's available when you don't have to wait to talk to someone.
So yesterday night I had a chance to see the demo from Maya, and it felt so human-to-human connection. If it was not for the very fast response, you can tell that someone wouldn't write so fast. But beyond that, it really felt like a very gentle and social kind of connection. And yet managing to get the information that's needed to say, yes, you're good to go for an interview or not. What did you find was difficult to get to that special sauce, I guess, to get to the point where it's not just metallic, but actually feels human?
Yeah, the real breakthrough for us was the ability to ask an open-ended question, which sounds pretty obvious to everybody in the room here. That's how we function. And I'm in sales, and open-ended questions are the way to get the most information from someone possible. It helps you, provide guidance and help them make the best decisions. But for AI, that was unthinkable for a long time, because why? you just don't know what's coming back, right? You know, a wide array of responses, and you have to have the ability to respond appropriately. And so for us, it was really bridging the gap between being able to ask questions that were more narrow and prescriptive, like for example, kind of ABC or yes/no questions, to questions like, what would you like to do with your career? Wow, I mean, that's a big question, right? There's a lot of ways that you can take that. And so, you know, for us, that, you know, that required a lot of effort and innovation between our machine learning, our computational linguistics teams, to be able to kind of crack that code. And now that we've done it, we're developing some really interesting conversations, and we're capturing information that's, you know, it's helping companies pick the best candidates, but also helping candidates get the right roles, right? Helping navigate them. So
And quicker.
And quicker, absolutely. The time to hire is dramatically reduced. In some cases, 70%. And for companies that are trying to, you know, compete in tight markets for talent, that's huge. If you can get to somebody faster and you've got a better experience, you're going to hire people not only faster, but you're going to hire better people.
I think so, and this is really about humanizing. People would compare this versus someone real interacting. But actually the competition is not that. It's someone not even having the time to talk to the candidates, right? So it's like, of course the best would be a human talking to a human and someone very well trained in HR. But if you don't have the time to do that, you end up with nothing, or just an email or a spreadsheet to fill. So to me, you're actually adding to the humanization, because versus nearly nothing, you're adding nearly 80%, let's say. I don't want to put a number anchoring, but much higher way of interaction with a company from the candidate's point of view.
Absolutely, absolutely. So there's tons of surveys. This is really, really well documented that candidates' #1 complaint when they do surveys about considering a job is they fall into this thing called the black hole, which means you don't know if you're still being considered for this job. I think everybody in the room, right, submitted a resume and had not heard back. Right, it's a common, it's a common experience we've all had. And how do you feel? You feel terrible, right? You feel like, hey, I spent all this time. And in some cases, people fill out long applications and never hear back. And so the AI can address that directly, because AI can deliver a response to say, hey, I got this information. All major companies have information about where a candidate is in the process. AI is a way to facilitate, pull that information out, deliver it to a candidate so a candidate has that information. And to your point, you know, we've looked at data where typically it takes 10 full-time recruiters a week to talk to 1,000 potential candidates for a job. And with AI, with Maya, we're seeing it being done in as little as 11 minutes. So that opens up a world of opportunity for recruiters to go find the best candidates, to build more human relationships, while eliminating manual tasks, just like your best assistant would do.
Maybe pushing a bit more. What do you think you could do even more to make it even more human?
Sure, there's a lot to be done in AI around personality. And personalities can vary with AI. One of the things that we found is been really successful is a mirroring personality of who you're talking to. Meaning, when you're talking to a technical person, most technical people want to talk to a technical recruiter that understands their terminology. Just like if you're talking to maybe an hourly worker, they may want to go and have a slightly different way of communicating. They use different tone and colloquialisms. And so, you know, it's key for really high quality AI to be able to communicate the way that person, that individual wants to communicate. And so our company, Maya Systems, is doing a lot to be able to improve the quality and fidelity of that experience, to personalize it, make it feel it more human. And there's 1,000 details in AI to get conversation right. And a lot of it has to do with AI, but a lot of it has to do with machine learning, which is about every time you have a conversation, AI gets a bit smarter. It learns more about the kind of terminology you might use, and then can implement that for future discussions.
Yeah, we had a panel about machine learning this morning, and personalization is a big field where machine learning can really improve. Paul, do you want to have a crack at humanizing the digital experience definition?
Well, I think if you look at what's going on in venture now, you know, we're in one of these eras where kind of everything's being disrupted. So, you know, we're a medium-sized firm. We have just over $3 billion under management. We have a $325 million fund. 70% of it's first money in, and the rest is multi-stage. If you look at what we're seeing happen now, we're seeing all levels of software being disrupted, primarily by AI and machine learning. We're seeing platforms being disrupted, all the security with deperimeterization, all the changes happening with the blockchain and crypto, happening not just around financial, but even healthcare and other things. So we're seeing all these different things change, and they all have that impact on this notion of like, how do you see yourself as a human in a digital world? Because the digital world is changing so rapidly. I mean, look at you all as a very strong technology company. Look how hard it is to keep up. Imagine the companies that are not technology companies, how hard it is for them to be able to keep up. And for us, you know, and it'll be similar, I think, just on a different scale for Enrique and the Designer Fund, but we look at about 3,000 companies a year, and we fund 10 of those companies. And what we're looking for there, right now, the big threads that we're pulling on are things like artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we've got companies like Maya, we've got companies in the systems space like Cerebras that are kind of causing a big stir, because if what Cerebras is working on works, then we can increase the computational input-output time by about 1,000x, so we can ultimately replace GPUs in the sort of the environment of creating ML and AI applications, and that's going pretty well so far. We've got a lot of things going on in financial technologies and marketplaces. We've got a company, States Title, now that you know, the founder, it's a little bit like the Netflix story of Reed Hastings going and getting pissed off at Blockbuster about the late fee. We had a founder, Max Simkoff, who's you know, is a very, very strong SaaS cloud software entrepreneur, had a nice exit to a company prior, was going out to buy a home, and he discovered this concept called title insurance. And like many of us, when you see it, you think, what is this thing? And then you find out it's $15,000, and it takes 3 weeks, and it's this archaic project, this archaic system. So he took the time to actually really uncover layers of it and just discover lots and lots of things that were at best inefficient and at worst corrupt in terms of that world. So he set out to completely blow up that entire industry. So we just had 8 weeks ago the first automated title insurance in history, search in history. So it took 30 microseconds and it cost $300. So that's $100 billion in market cap that's at risk with companies that have chosen to work on politics instead of working on technology. And so they're vulnerable as a result. So these are some of the things that we see, and so those are the kind of entrepreneurs that we're looking for to be able to exploit those discontinuities in the market.
Yeah, going from very bad human or user experience to something that's supposed to be so smooth.
The kind of thing that you have the experience and then you tell 10 people about it, because it's so, you know, it's another portfolio company, but a different kind of thing. We have a new dog. We had an old dog and he's gone. Now we have a new dog. We have a puppy. And so he had his first vet appointment today. And we funded a company called Vetted, which comes to your home and does veterinary services. And you think, okay, that's not that big a deal. That should have been done long ago. Well, you're right. It should have been done long ago. It's just not. So Vet came to the home today. It was like a completely different experience. Anybody who's a pet owner knows what a nightmare is to take your pet to the vet and all the anxiety and everything else. Now the people come into the home and the dog thinks it's another friend to play with, you know, and boom, you know, like they're in and out. And these are all the things that are just happening to us here in the Silicon Valley, and it's subtle because we're so heavily exposed to it. But as these things roll forward into the world, they create incredible opportunities, and it's all around this notion of humanizing the digital experience.
Enrique, do you have some examples that you think, actually let's start with the examples of bad design, the ones that you would not found, but you're like, how could it still happen today in 2018?
It's a great question. Well, first of all, like I understand how hard it is to build anything from scratch. As many of you, are building products, so I'm hesitant to throw any product under the bus. One company that comes to mind because you mentioned IoT related products. We looked at investing in Juicero, which is basically like a farm fresh juice delivery service with a smart juice dispenser, essentially. And when you think of when you dig into the mission of that company, there was actually some pretty good intentions. Most people in America don't get their enough fresh fruits and vegetables. They just simply don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. So if you serve it in this juice, in this drink that people enjoy, more people will get their healthy serving. So like when you think of it from a nutritional standpoint, it was a conceptually it's a worthy mission. But where I think it started to fall down is the obsession with creating these packets that had to be used with this machine, and turns out you could also take out the packet and just squeeze it with your hand. So it's like the hardware device wasn't actually really that needed. And then the hardware device also was like Wi-Fi enabled and connected, so as soon as you put in a juice packet, you get a little feedback that it's fresh. So that way you don't drink juice that's expired. But it's like, did it really need to be connected? You could just read the package that like it was expired like a couple of days ago. So there's just some things where it's like, okay, I think we're kind of like forcing technology and looking for a problem that maybe didn't really exist, because you can walk into most stores, there's so many alternatives to getting fresh juices all around you. Yes, they weren't the freshest, but I think they were 80% of the way there. So I think the product kind of was failing on a number of ways, and even though it was backed by amazing investors and raised over $100 million, ultimately it didn't work out. And so I think that's something that we often look for, is like, do we really actually need this tech? Like, is it really actually essential? Is there some other alternative that can be done before automatically assuming that that the technology is going to be this silver bullet and going to solve this fundamental behavioral challenge? I think the other area to consider around humanizing an experience a little bit more broadly is setting appropriate expectations. So I was just reading, one of my friends had a quote, Sarah Wool, like, the devil is in the details, but the soul is the experience. And so when you think about an experience, it's multiple touch points. So let's take the case of Airbnb. You have to look for a city that you're going to, you have to find a home, you eventually have to request and introduce yourself to a host, finally book it. Once you land, you have to get there. So all of these are potential touch points that a service could meet your expectations, exceed your expectations, or not deliver and disappoint you. And so even if you have a 4-star amazing Michelin-like experience, if you walk into the restaurant or walk into the hotel and there's a dirty napkin, or like it's a dirty cup or something, it's totally going to disappoint your expectations. So I think the biggest thing that we see with technology is like setting the appropriate expectations so that you can at least meet expectations, and then throughout the whole experience you can selectively decide where do you want to exceed expectations and add delight. So, and back to the example of Airbnb, they introduce features like being able to instantly book a listing, so you don't have to go back and forth and wait. They'll send you a guide around what are other locations and places you can do, and automatically do that. You don't need a human or a tour guide to do that. You can just automatically produce that. And then before you're going to check in, sending you specific instructions and reminding you of how to get there. Like tiny little details that just reduce potential error or reduce potential frustration. And those are all things that I think technology should do when my expectation is like, I don't actually need a person to get that information. I think anytime that technology can do that, that's fantastic. But when I do really need a human and I really am expecting a human, I probably don't actually want a bot to pretend to be a human. I want it to probably just say it's a bot, and it's gonna assist, and it's gonna pass this information to humans, or eventually get to humans. But personally, I'm not a huge fan of creating bots that are simulating humans. Rather, I prefer they just be assistants and upfront, and not confuse or set the expectation. Because again, what if I answer? I ask open-ended questions, and then it responds strangely, and then I'm like, wait a minute, like I'm not talking to a human. Then I lose trust in the service, and that hurts the brand, which hurts the revenue long term. So I think a big thing is around setting expectations throughout an experience, and when can technology be strategically deployed throughout that experience to automate things and make it more cost effective.
I actually like a lot what you mean, what you talked about touch points, because you just need one touch points to be wrong, and the experience will be wrong. And if I remember your demo, actually it's very consistent. The candidate answers questions, he may come back later saying, sorry, I can't do the interview anymore, and it's still extremely consistent. So all the touch points seems to be, and maybe this is the beauty of AI in this case, you stay very consistent to the experience. Do you find one touch points to be more difficult than the others?
Well, for AI, I think that the key to being successful is to be kind of realistic about the objectives. And for us, we've narrowed our scope of application to the recruiting space. So Maya's not great at predicting the weather or helping to identify when something's going to break on a manufacturing floor. But we are incredibly good at being able to have compelling conversations with candidates, help recruiters make their lives easier, and keep people employed as often as possible. So yeah, I mean, the touch points, each touch point has sort of a different objective. So for example, the touch point when someone is wanting to decide which job to apply for, that's usually at the very early stages. People call that FAQ, where somebody before AI might go to a page that has frequently asked questions, and they'll try to find answers, and they get frustrated and they move on. Well, for AI, that's a great opportunity to not only answer the questions in real time, but then move the conversation to some sort of end goal, which is, for most companies, it's to get somebody to apply to the job that they're the best fit for.
So let me challenge this a little. The candidates are not your customers. The human resources departments are your customers. Do you use AI for them, or do you use a human for them?
Well, there's two ways to look at that. But for us, our customers are absolutely the company, but we also serve the purpose of helping candidates as well. For the company, they have objectives around being able to make great placements on time, and not only to pick the right people, but also to support the onboarding process. So if you look at companies that hire at scale, and I'm talking about the Accentures and IBMs of the world, where they're onboarding 1,000 people a day. Well, it turns out that experience, those first couple of days, are crucial. They're crucial for the company, it's crucial for the hiring manager, it's crucial for the candidate. And if you set that experience off where it's not an elegant experience, it's not delightful, then it's going to really cascade into problems and retention challenges. So for us, we're absolutely serving the hiring manager, because we're not only helping them find a candidate, but we're improving the onboarding experience, right? Answering questions about benefits, being there to check in with them. I mean, how nice is it to, once the boss is off in a meeting and you're there at your desk, that you get a friendly little text message and it says, hey, this is Maya, remember I helped you find this job. How's your first day go? Wow, I mean, that's gratifying, right? If, as a candidate, I feel like I'm being heard and I've got an opportunity to ask a question. Like, hey, do you guys do casual Fridays? Right, or something that may not be easy to ask. So I think there's a way to extend sort of this human element with AI that serves the purposes of both the candidate, but also absolutely the hiring manager, the HR team.
And do you see a point where you would have an AI bot to talk to the HR team?
Yeah, well, we're kind of doing that today in things like scheduling. So for example, if we interview a candidate and the candidate is a good fit, then we're going to give that candidate the opportunity to schedule themselves onto the hiring manager's calendar. And then the hiring manager is going to get access to the transcript of the conversation. They will give a chance to, if they need to reschedule, they can let Maya know, hey, I need to find another time for this person, or maybe they've got a follow-up question before the interview, and that they can communicate that through Maya, just to help that interview process go that much more efficiently for both of them.
And to the point of Enrique, you make it very upfront, this is an AI bot, AI agent.
Yeah, we do. We think that it's important to state kind of what Maya is, and it kind of resets the expectations. Now, that being said, not 100% of our clients will state that Maya is a bot.
Oh, so you can configure it.
You can, absolutely. And one thing that's interesting, so one of our clients did a survey. They surveyed 500 candidates that went through this process where they talked to Maya, where Maya was introduced as a bot. Maya was introduced as an AI recruiting assistant. And they asked a number of questions, and Maya got great marks in terms of candidate experience. But one of the questions that we snuck in there was, is Maya a human? And 72% said, yes, Maya's a human. Even though we were upfront that Maya's a bot. So, I mean, it really speaks volumes to, about the quality of AI today and its ability to have these really believable conversations. And but to your question, yeah, the vast majority of companies will introduce Maya as an AI recruiting assistant.
I think you all remember the Google I/O demo, where Google was making a call to a hairdresser without announcing it was an AI agent. And it was smooth, very, very smooth. Do you think it was a mistake or not for Google not to announce? Because I think with my friends, we're divided on this. But what do you think? It was good or not good to not announce?
I think that AI is becoming so ubiquitous now that I don't think people are going to care. Like, I don't care, for me personally. I understand, you know, somebody might have a preference from that perspective, but I think what I like about Maya is that Maya will get asked the question, are you a bot? And it will say it is. But it's just, you know, the prevalence of AI across all aspects of what we're seeing in terms of next generation startups are such that that human-machine interface is going to become more and more blurred over time. The thing that I have sort of as a techno-optimist in thinking about this, I look at what Maya allows people to do, which is get out of, I mean, what they're replacing in many cases are spreadsheets, email, pencil and paper, phone and fax, and, you know, all this stuff, right? And allowing people to focus on higher level activities. When you talk to recruiters, what they want to do is actually interact with the people, and particularly want to interact with the highest quality people and make their quotas. And Maya helps them do that. If I look at, you know, we have another company, Response Software, in the security space, and they go into security operations centers. And notionally, you can look at companies like that and say, oh, they're going to replace people, which ultimately is what they're trying to do. They're trying to replace the, you know, 75% of the tier 1 analysts, and there are literally, at the moment in the United States, the estimate is we're 1 million people short. Like, if there were 1 million tier 1 security analysts tomorrow, they would all get hired, like magically, right? There's that much demand. So what Respond is doing is allowing people to not have to trudge through. The reason that there aren't tier 1 analysts, it's a horrible job. You sit and you stare at a terminal all day, and if you're lucky, you'll see something that's an anomaly, and then it won't be a false positive, and you'll get a pat on the back, and that's it. And after 18 months, everybody quits and does something else. So when I look at what Respond can do and other companies like it can do, is they can allow people to focus on higher level activities, right? Hackers are getting smarter, you know, penetration defenses are weaker, deperimeterization of the enterprise, all that stuff. So what has to happen is that humans have to get smarter, so machines have to get smarter, right? That allows everybody to raise their game, and ultimately, that's what I feel like I'm seeing right now across our portfolio and across some of these large companies that are out there, is that if you're not all in on these automation technologies, then you're just gonna be dead. because there's no room for you. This isn't a choice. This is just simply how aggressive you are about it and how elegant you are about deploying it.
Divi?
Yes, and so for me, going back to your question, I think what counts is that people aren't frustrated with experiences. So whether you know that you're talking to a robot or not, I think only matters if you're already frustrated. And so it's removing the friction, in the application. And in listening to the discussion here today, it's pretty apparent that a lot of the innovations at the application level, and so redefining the way title insurance is done, or these kind of problems, and that's great. And I think what's holding some of that back is that from a hardware point of view, from even a sensor point of view, there's limited ability to tap into emotional reactions. So emotional reactions drive the machine learning particularly well. So learning systems benefit greatly from knowing if you're frustrated, knowing if you're confused, knowing if you're about ready to give up. There are some good emerging sensor technologies that can help that. And so there's eye tracking technologies to help determine your attention, what kind of state of mind you might be in. There's blood pressure sensing, which is tied into heavily to stress and emotions. And so the better we can do on the sensor side and the hardware side, the more can be done at the application level. So it all ties together. And right now it doesn't work perfectly, but that's where the opportunity is for innovation on the technology side.
What do you see as a really good use case where it's not a good experience today, but if we had better sensors that could really go the next step?
Sure. It's always baffled me why we don't have wearables that are better tied into what's going on physiologically. There are blood pressure sensors, there's pulse, things like that, but they're fairly rudimentary, and often they're not in the form factor that you can have in a nice wearable. But I think most people would really benefit from knowing, say, their stress level throughout the day. It wouldn't be that hard to accomplish something like that, and then you could know, well, when I go have a meeting with this person, that my stress level goes up, so maybe I'll have a coffee after. No, you suppress stress, Nicolas.
All right.
You're the opposite, but that's also good to know. And so these kind of things are, from a technology standpoint, are very easy to do, but they don't happen in a ubiquitous way, or haven't yet. And so I think tying the capabilities together, so there's sensors that perform particular functions, but again, sometimes it's the wrong data or the wrong context, but tying it together to help a user be able to look in one place and get the information on stress, on fitness, on any other type of physiological effect is, I think, really exciting.
Actually, that would be a very good answer to humanizing the digital experience. Because at the end, we are analog. We are converting to all this digital information. We have the machine learning panel that says that it's all going to be fixed with all the right data. And then it backs to us, where we can make analog decisions about changing behaviors, diet, or whatnot. So I do like this very nice cycle from analog to digital and back.
There's one of the things that Divi said that just sort of prompted me. So there's an organization that you and I know, Mach 49, that works with large companies, and they worked with Purina. And Purina came in thinking they want to do kind of a Fitbit for dogs. And you think, okay, that's pretty logical, right? They're seeing Fitbit and they have dogs. Like, they make a lot of money off of dogs. So why wouldn't we do this Fitbit for dogs? So they started going down that path. And then this is where the human part comes in. They went out and they interviewed 300 or 400 pet owners around this whole Fitbit for dogs. And they said, essentially, I kind of know if my dog's fat because I can look at him. He's fat. I'm kind of bummed out about it, but I haven't changed anything, right? And so they sort of got to this place and they said, but the thing I really want to know is, what is my dog feeling, right? And so that was like the poof, like the light bulb came off. that said, okay, let's design, which they're working on, let's design a harness full of sensors that'll help determine the mood of the animal, right? And then they'll measure it, and then they'll create sort of the Fitbit for moods for the sort of the mental health of a dog, like when does it get stressed, things like that. And you think, okay, that's not humanizing the digital experience, that's caninizing the digital experience. However, those humans, as you know, spend north of $100 billion a year on dogs in some form or another across all aspects of healthcare, food, and things like that. You know, we just saw what was the Blue Buffalo go out for $8.8 billion. You know, we're seeing Farmer's Dog go get funded at some crazy amount of money to feed human food to dogs. So like when you see these things, you have to, I think, and especially for you guys with sensors, you have to be kind of you have to think more holistically. I mean, one of the things I like about Designer Fund is that these guys get exposed to everybody. I mean, everybody who has something new and innovative, the Tony Fidels of the world, the Brian Chesneys of the world. I mean, these people that are so visionary and they're creating all these kind of, you know, amazing next generation products and services. You know, they get exposure to this stuff, but it is a broad palette of opportunities, and you have to have a sensor network of your own so that you're finding those things, and then you can find those kind of creases, those opportunities.
So it's very interesting you mentioned these pet opportunities, because yesterday we had a keynote from Qualcomm. Pankaj Kedia is the head of wearables. And he basically walked us through the huge opportunities for having pets. Dogs and cats alone is a huge opportunity, and I will share the slides afterwards. But what was interesting is that we can leverage what we do with Qualcomm on the wearable for humans, where you need to be very low power, always sensing, and it's not just motion, but different sensors working together with nice sensor fusion. And they announced this strategic partnership between us and them. But actually there's nothing much difference between what we do, like I said, a Fitbit for pet. And so humanizing the digital experience is maybe this analog to digital and what you do with it. Yeah. Enrique?
Yeah, maybe just to build upon this, another way of maybe reframing humanizing is like, how do you enable, again, more human-to-human interaction? How do you augment human capabilities? So in the health space, Sano is developing like a continuous glucose monitoring. So I'm a huge fan of giving people more feedback into how their diet affects their experience. We have a shared portfolio company, Omada Health, which helps prevent people from getting diabetes, type 2 diabetes specifically, and now moving into heart disease. And I think it's like 1 in 3 Americans are going to die from a preventable lifestyle disease like diabetes or heart disease. And I think more people die from heart disease than all cancers combined, which like it still doesn't compute for me. I'm just like, that's ridiculous. So I think there's a huge opportunity using sensors to enable, for example, in Omada Health's case, to enable users to step on a Wi-Fi enabled scale, automatically send that data to their health coach, have their pedometer, have that information also get connected, snap a photo of the food that they're eating, and automatically decipher what that food is in the calorie count, and all that information get organized for a health coach to make better recommendations and enable a health coach to work with many more patients than would otherwise be possible without that automated technology. So I'm excited about increasing the capacity that humans have to serve more people. We have another shared portfolio company, Hustle, which helps political campaigns, nonprofits, other progressive organizations engage their user base. So right now, if you guys get a random phone call or an email from someone, you probably don't pick up, you probably just ignore it. It's like spam. So people aren't answering their phone, people aren't opening up emails, they're not responding to direct mailers. But the one thing that they do respond to is a human actually text messaging them. And so Hustle enables organizers to have one-to-many conversations, like thousands of conversations, and the response rates are orders of magnitude higher, and have helped win really important political campaigns across the country. And so I think that's another great example of using technology to augment human potential and an ability to connect with more people. And so anything like that, I'm excited about seeing more of. So if you guys are aware of more examples like that or other applications in your portfolio that extend humans' potential, that's exciting to me.
Yeah, I think, so kind of going back to the AI lens for kind of expanding potential, we at Maya know that people, not only is there an opportunity to obviously, help fill roles, but we think there's a huge population of people that might be in the wrong job, or they don't know of other opportunities. And so one of the neat things about AI and conversation is that we can tap into things like interests of what people might want to do, which is really exciting. And so, there's this kind of future state that we can envision where Maya can have a conversation, and not just with the people that are kind of enabled in the LinkedIn network for professionals, but we're talking about everybody. I mean, the hourly forklift driver who doesn't have a LinkedIn profile, that person can have a quick conversation through text message on their phone to learn a little bit more about their experience, and ask an open-ended question like, hey, what do you want to do next? What's important to you? And by opening up and learning about what's important to that person, we have the ability then to share that information with third parties that have access to not just thousands of jobs, but millions of jobs, and be able to canvas across a wide array and be able to make some really interesting matches for companies that might just be traditionally looking at resumes, which really only tells half the story, but really being able to open it up to what's important to that person. And that's a real interesting intersection between kind of people and how they've done things in the past and technology to really open up really new markets to really improve people's lives.
So when I think about your example of AI agent for recruiting, it fits all the checkboxes. It does make sense because you have two parties that actually want to engage and have a very good experience and onboarding and ongoing. What other examples where AI agent would be really valuable in humanizing the digital experience?
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about a massive number of applications for AI, and obviously you see them on the drive down here between cars, or sort of predicting or anticipating what might be the right stock portfolio for you, or being able to engage and connect people with information that goes beyond just more traditional suit searches that have happened for a long time. And so, yeah, we think there's a whole world of applications that AI can open up to make people's lives better. And we've been dabbling with some things that include using AI to communicate through things like Alexa, so that Alexa, Siri, those kinds of products today, they're really designed to have one really short threaded conversation, which is you ask one question, you get one answer back. It's not a conversation. A conversation is a two-way, engaging process and experience that has an underlying logic flow. And so by applying some of the innovations I think that we've done here at Maya, I think they can be applied to solve a lot of business challenges, and just improve people's daily lives.
So I'm going to open for questions in about 5 minutes, but on Fingerprint, so you're in charge of Fingerprint, what do you think would be a good opportunity for making the user experience even better than it is today?
Sure. So Fingerprint, one of the common frustrations in user experience is called false reject rate, meaning that you try to unlock your device and you are somehow thought to be not you, an imposter. And then you have to try again, and sometimes this repeats several times in a row. And so the current technology in the world is largely capacitive in nature, which doesn't work well with under wet conditions. And so TDK has got an ultrasonic approach to doing fingerprint sensing that is far more resistant to the effects of water, as an example. And so we're looking forward to improving the user experience in that regard, certainly. But TDK has other technologies that I think are really relevant for the discussion. We mentioned AI agents, so you could imagine a fitness situation where you have a workout and you want to be cycling heart rate and you want to have different kind of chemical effects, ketosis, things like that going on as you're exercising, and maybe switch the routine depending on what state you're in.
Yep.
And so in order to make all this possible, I think there needs to be some innovation around sensors themselves. TDK is a great magnetics company. We made an announcement about 1.5 years ago about a patch you can wear on your chest to fully characterize electrical activity of the heart. No one had done that before. The key to that is ultra-sensitive magnetic sensors. But there's an array of them, and so there's potentially some AI that can go into making that work better. So it all ties together. If you can essentially have 80% of an ER on your wrist, then there's a world of possibilities from fitness, from medical, safety. You can have alerts sent if you have some irregular conditions electrically in your body. All of that's really exciting from my perspective.
Actually, the biomag is a very good example of improvement of the user experience. The patient, it's not intrusive, it's fast. Very good. More reactions before we go to questions?
I'll try to open people's minds a little bit because I usually get this question of like, what's the most unusual kind of startup that you've seen lately? So we'll throw that out there and allow people to know that they can talk about anything. But Enrique and I were speaking in the hallway because we were both struck by this company. It's called Better Place Forest, and it's the first cemetery company I've seen in my career, in my 16 years in venture capital. And the story around it is actually quite poignant. The young man who started the company, his mother was terminally ill with cancer, and then while that was happening, his father had a stroke and died. So at 11 years old, he was orphaned, and spent his adolescence going to the cemetery to speak to his parents, basically. And the cemetery is by a major road and also near an airport. And so he just would have these experiences, and literally you'd be thinking there's gotta be a better place for this kind of experience. And his best friend was traveling around the world and roughly contemporaneously was in Hawaii and saw the funeral of a famous surfer where they took the ashes and they put them out in the ocean. And he said, well, why wouldn't you take the ashes and you put them under this tree so everybody could come back to that tree and honor that person over time? So long story short, they put this company together. They bought a forest up in Mendocino County, and they started the first effectively evergreen mortuary, where your ashes are mixed in with mulch and potting materials, and there's flowers planted around redwoods. And when you go to celebrate the life of that person, you're celebrating it in a forest with an iPad of all the highlights of the person and things like that. That's kind of what they facilitate. So we looked at the company. Sadly, we were sort of like a little bit of a week behind it, didn't quite get in, but the company had eye-popping numbers in terms of their first penetration into the market, and they'll be opening a Bay Area forest in the next probably 6 months or so down in Santa Cruz. So it's not sensors, it's not AI, it's just simply human ingenuity, and there's just, fortunately, we live in the center of the world for that still, and hopefully we'll still keep that coming.
All right. If that doesn't open your mind, I don't know what does. Is there any questions?
Anyone?
It's not really a question, it's just a response to what Paul just said. In 2007, we buried my father in a place like this in Germany. So, they do exist, and they already existed, I guess. And it is a much better experience, so fully relate.
It's in Germany, and also there's one back east in upstate New York, but neither one of those are funded for scale. And so this one we may hear about more, assuming.
Yeah, I can second the same thing. That whole experience, which is traumatic enough, is made even more traumatic by the actual positioning of those things. I got a question here. I just moved to the US about a month ago. You know, as you can probably tell from my accent, I'm not a native from here. You know, just like Nicolas over there. You know, and he's one of my guides about how to live in the US as a what? What are we?
Yeah.
Legal aliens as an alien, right? But one of the things I was struck with, I just moved from Sweden, and one of the things I was struck with was about how the insurance process works in the US, right? And you know, I find it sort of, I'm used to sort of quite a smooth sort of flow of things, you know. Everything in the country I was living in Sweden is related to your personal number, like your social security number, and then everything stems from that. And you can go online to like 20 different companies, you can get quotes like boom, like this, and get your stuff. And I was trying to get like auto and renters and all the rest of it, insurance. And I was struck that this process, which was actually very human, because I had to deal with like a guy sitting across the desk who was typing into a computer to get all this stuff going for me. I was thinking, you know, this must be possible to be more effective and productive. And I was wondering from the panel, I just don't know. I'm not looking for specific advice about particular insurers here, but I was interested to know whether you have any thoughts on whether that particularly sort of special industry in its own way, whether there's some things you've seen, or there's opportunities or things you know of where that quite complex, I think overly complex process, you know, is being more maybe automated or more efficiently dealt with, but also in a way which is human and actually addresses the needs of the consumer. So.
As it happens, InsurTech is one of the hottest areas now. And we have a company that one of our strongest blockchain entrepreneurs has started called Decent, which is around affordable healthcare for all, and really kind of making that whole process a little bit more human, for lack of a better way to describe it. I would say that most of the things that I'm seeing are pretty siloed, you know, like we're seeing people that are, because the problems and the scale of the financial opportunity are so large in insurance, it's not kind of one thing, not sort of one omnibus solution, but it's somebody that is, you know, going after life insurance, or, you know, we have a company called Health IQ that has a very creative kind of hook, which is and you've all been spammed by Health IQ if you're on social networks. It's, you know, can you run an 8-minute mile? Can you lift a certain amount of weight? Whatever it might happen to be. And they have figured out a way to sort of corner the market on healthy people who work out and ride bikes and run and things like that in America. And they've assembled millions of profiles, and then they essentially cross-hatch those profiles to what's known as the RIP database at Facebook, which means, you know, when people die, the rest in peace database. And they figured out that their subset of people that they were tracking died at a rate 70% less than the overall population, at all other things being normalized, age and income and things like that. So they took that insight, and they have now created what we believe will be the world's most profitable life insurance company as a result of doing that. And then soon they're going to also go after health insurance with the same model. So again, that's just one piece of it. That's not one place that's sort of like making it all easier from that perspective, but eventually what we see in these markets is you see people go after the silos, and then you see, it's a little bit like what travel was 30 years ago. You get a Travelocity, you get this, you get that, and then all of a sudden you get a Kayak. You get the metadata level organizers that bring everything up a level and make it easier and better, but we're not close to that in insurance. Insurance was one of the hardest to automate, in part because it's so heavily regulated.
If nobody else does, I have a quick one to take a slightly less morbid path than cemeteries and life insurance. But I think that the closer we get and the more that we interact with these sort of digital assistants, we're sort of approaching a sort of uncanny valley. And I think that there are two choices to make is, do we want that which we're interacting with to feel human, or do we want to, and I think that's something that Enrique touched upon, is he doesn't want to have a robot appearing as a human, and I think that we have two choices of directions to take with how we interact with these things. And I don't know which is the correct one, or which is the one that we are sort of going toward.
Yeah, maybe I should have been a little clear. It's like, I don't want a robot, someone to be appearing as a robot when I really want to talk to a human. But in some cases, to Paul's point, it's like, I don't really care. So maybe to answer both your question and the previous gentleman's question, we have a company in our portfolio called Better, which makes it really easy to get reimbursed for your health expenses. So if you go to a therapist or a physical therapist, more often than not, you can actually get reimbursed for those out-of-pocket expenses. But most health insurance providers make it extremely difficult for you to get reimbursed. You have to like call a number, or you have to fax something in. You have to fill out the paperwork correct. If you fill it out wrong, they won't notify you. So they're literally sitting on like billions of dollars of reimbursements that are eligible to people. So with Better, you just take a photo of your bill, authorize them as an agent, and Better will either automatically file on your behalf because they know the workflow of that specific insurer, or a human assistant will come in to make that process better. But that's a case where it's like, I don't really care who does it, like I just want money back. And more often than not, people get on average, I think, $1,400 back that they otherwise just wouldn't get at all. So it's just like $1,400 shows up in the mail. It's like, sweet. And like, I didn't want to talk to a person. Like I didn't want to call in and press all the different key codes and wait on hold. So in those cases, I think it's fantastic if some kind of...
You don't mind what's behind, if it's a human or AI, you really don't care.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's particular use cases like that where most of us just don't want to spend our time doing that, and we want some type of technology to assist. So I think it's just, again, back to more setting the appropriate expectations, and maybe like you said in your example, if someone asks a question like, are you a bot, you'll respond and tell them that you are. If someone probably says, hey, can I talk to a human or something else, maybe there's some protocol there. So just giving people the option, if that's the case that they want, is a general best practice. And then one other tactic from a user experience standpoint, one of our partners started a company called Oslo, which was recently acquired by Facebook and was pioneering a lot of the conversational UI elements. And a lot of times, if you ask a question, Oslo could respond with a set of choices that you could select from. So it helped constrain the conversation branches so that you would have a higher, the bot would be better enabled to respond to the question and not get stuck in this uncanny situation where it doesn't quite know what you're asking for. So I think there's ways that technology can set the appropriate expectation and constrain the UI choices that people have, rather than being completely open-ended, but open-ended can be great as well too, for certain examples as well.
I think the kind of with all due respect, the way I would answer that is that you don't really get to choose. And the reason I would say that is there's a young man named Frank Long, who's at Google. If you ever get a chance to see, he's got a presentation that he doesn't publish, but I've seen him do it, where he goes and he spent a year in China for Google and then basically kind of reflected on what his experience is. He's ethnic Chinese, but grew up in America, so he's got he looks like everybody there, but he sounds like everybody here, and he kind of lives in both worlds. His commentary was frankly, I wouldn't say chilling, but it was just a reminder that like in technology doesn't stay still, it just keeps going on. And so if I look at a lot of the AI-based stuff, which is a big part of innovation right now, it's going to be, over time, it's going to be dominated by the Chinese because a couple of different things. One, they have a completely different regulatory structure. And what I mean by that is they'll just simply pick a city of 20 million people, of which there are many, and they'll say that's the city where we're going to do, all the cars are going to be automated, right? And then they'll develop billions of minutes of data sets around that. And then they will actually have way more knowledge than we will, or anybody else who's working on these things, particularly in North America or Europe, where there's a different sensibility around that. And you can apply that down the line to a lot of different things. So I think, I had this thought when you were asking the question. I said there are people that love the Middle Ages and they go to these Renaissance fairs because they want to go drink mead and dress funny and kind of do what they do, right? Which is cool. That's like, it's great to have that choice. But the world isn't a Renaissance fair. Right, the world is all about moving forward and moving forward around technology, and I think the pace of innovation we're going to see, particularly around artificial intelligence and machine learning over the next 10 years, is going to be breathtaking. And I think you just sort of have to get with it, because I just don't think there's going to be, I don't think there's an alternative.
So actually, now that you say that, I think that the group here are all sort of live in this world of tech where we embrace it a little more, but are you saying then that there's sort of an expectation to the masses that, not to be silly here, but it's not so much as humanizing the digital experience, but should we be digitizing our experience too and sort of meeting in the middle? Because I think that there is a sort of expectation for like everybody to sort of embrace this to, you know, it's sort of upon our will as well.
Yeah, I mean, so I grew up in Southern Virginia, and my family has been in the South since 1680. When I go home, and which I will be doing soon for my high school reunion, I kind of have this like dead man walking feel. Like when I look around at the call centers and the human farms of people that are doing low-level work, and I just look at that stuff and say that's all going to go away. And so to the extent that we already have tensions around humans and technology, sort of the negative of humanizing the digital experience, that's going to get a lot worse. And so, you know, my encouragement of all the people in my network is like, get behind it. Like, find a way to get to be part of it. Don't get pissed off about somebody coming from India who takes a job, quote unquote, because that person coming from India worked their ass off to learn how to be an AI engineer, and that's really helpful that they're here working with us. So, like, don't get all negative on that stuff. That's what happened in Damascus in the 10th century, right? And you know, we got to get with it, right? This is, we're in a more of a race for technology leadership as a society than anybody realizes, I think, and we just got to get on board.
Yeah, I think the point is you don't really get to choose. Free markets are going to prevail. Farming is going to be done by machines. You know, you go to a store to buy something, you may not see a human there to talk to, but you have the choice to go somewhere else, and again, free markets will prevail. It's not a choice that we're going to be making. Following up on one of the great points Enrique made, from my perspective, you really need to get to the point where you can explain and solve the problems is why you prefer to know that you're talking to a human. And so you mentioned, you're frustrated potentially, or intimated that, but why is that the case? That I want to talk to a human, not talk to the automated system right now. If automated system did what you wanted it to do, and you wouldn't care if you're talking to a robot or a human. And so that's really where the next wave of innovations have to come from, is removing that friction.
I think it's very much the same as when you call a call center and you know the person you're talking to can't do anything to help you, and you're asking for the supervisor. And it will be the same for the AI agent. So I'm hoping that if I ask Maya to talk to the supervisor, it's not like, yeah, let me pass you to Maya number 2.
But look at ATMs, right? So
yes.
Yeah, everybody fought ATMs, and then how many times do we go see the bank, right? How many times do you talk to a person at the bank? Ultimately, over time, more and more of these things are going to reach that level of simplicity.
Yeah. Maybe one more question. Yes, at the very back.
Yeah, speaking of call centers, so when do I finally get a human when I want it without waiting 5 minutes for an automated system? I had this experience just today with Comcast. And the automated system never solves any problems.
There is an opportunity here.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, so I worked in the call center space at Kana. It's actually it's a really hard problem, and people have spent billions of dollars kind of working on this. It's getting kind of better and better, but there's still that edge case stuff. I was in a voice recognition company for a while. I mean, there's all these things. I think we have to kind of go back and think about how manual all this stuff was 30 years ago, and appreciate all the things that have been automated since then, but there's still a higher level of activity, and frustration's hard to deal with, and accents are hard to deal with. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't work as well within those kind of systems. The reason that you don't see quite as much investment, there's a good company, Gladly, my friends at Kana are doing that company, that's doing kind of a whole rewrite of the call center, which I think is ultimately what needs to happen. So they'll incorporate all the modern technology. But it's a very hard problem, and one of the reasons why you don't see quite as much innovation there is that the exits are terrible. And so, you know, you see people like me put money behind companies like Maya, because Maya could exit at 7 to 9 times revenue. Call center companies, even a decent call center automation company exits at 2 or 3 times revenue at best, and sometimes not even that. So unfortunately, the reason you're having a bad experience is that there's not enough incentive for young entrepreneurs to go dedicate themselves to solving that, what I would say is the last minute problem or the last mile problem within the call center. And the rest of the stuff is kind of done okay, you know, at a certain level.
It does feel like that last 1 hour sometimes.
Yeah. I get it.
Very good. I want to ask one final question that I asked the panelists earlier. Is there a book you would like to recommend to the audience?
Marketing to developers.
Oh, you're too kind.
There you go. That's right. I'll second that one. So.
All right. Thank you. You have to read the book at some point to say that, okay?
Oh man, I've read a lot of books recently. One that's a classic is Yuval Harari's work on like Sapiens and Homo Deus. I really recommend. And Michael Pollan also recently came out with a book on how to change your mind, which is fascinating. And then for more fun, but also addresses really important issues in our society is Born a Crime by Trevor Noah, about growing up in apartheid. So those are 3 pretty different books, but I think the more that we understand human history, the better we as technologists can make more informed decisions, so we don't just keep repeating patterns. So I think you know, going to Stanford undergrad and grad, like I took no history classes or no liberal classes, so I think this stuff is really important because a ton of folks like ourselves who are making these technologies that are going to impact people's lives need that perspective.
And it touches on empathy you mentioned at the very beginning.
So I don't have a book to recommend, partly because I just don't read as much anymore. Unfortunately, I'm one of these people now that's down to the little side bits, you know, the little clickbait stuff and all the blogs and everything else. So it's terrible. I've lost my attention span for books to some extent. So, but I will say I have a funny book story, which is I was going into one of my board meetings. The company is Mobile Iron, which was a very successful mobile IT company. And I went into the meeting, and this is now obviously a few years ago because you're going to recognize this, but there was a big stack of hardcover books. And I said to Bob Tinker, the CEO, what's going on? He said, well, Andy Weir wrote this cool book, and you know, you should take a look at it. And I was like, oh, The Martian, never heard of it, right? So it's like, there's one of our Android engineers, and he wrote The Martian. And then now he's like, he spends all of his time in Hollywood and doing that. So it's kind of a fun intersection between what happens in the Silicon Valley. So, huh? Oh, and The Way to Design, sorry. Yeah, my partner, Steve Basala, good catch, wrote a book last year that's the bestseller on Amazon in its category called The Way to Design. So it's literally a full book on this topic, and it profiles these guys and Airbnb and Pinterest and all the really cool design-led companies and what leads to that. Steve spent 7 years at IDEO, and then just knows all of the kind of the movers and shakers in that world. It's a great articulation of that. So it's right, very topical. Good catch, thanks.
Yeah, nice catch. Enrique?
Consult my Audible account, but so I just finished a great book called Why We Sleep, and it's profound how important sleep is, and I had no idea. And one of the things that's interesting is that there's like 2 big takeaways. One for me was that sleep and either not sleeping enough or too much, it's not a balance sheet. So if you get 6 hours and then the next day you get 10, it doesn't equal 8. Once you've lost that sleep, you know, it's had a pretty big impact on your health, your memory. There's a direct correlation between lack of sleep and a whole variety of diseases, including Alzheimer's. I can't remember what the second point was, but I'll take you to the other book, which is called Enlightenment Now by Steven Pinker, which is a phenomenal book. I think it was like Bill Gates said it was one of his favorite books of the year, which is basically taking a long view of the world, and that if you read the paper, everything seems terrible. But if you look at it in its totality, if you look at it and measure it in decades, human progress is phenomenal. It continues to get better and better. So, yeah.
I think that's a great book to finish, to talk about the path we are going towards humanizing the digital experience and making things way better for everyone. Please join me to thank this great lineup of participants.